Good morning. I'd like to call the Joint Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and Senate Committee on Finance Subcommittee on K through 12 Higher Education CIP to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Senators Buck, Canizaro, Neal, Stone, Dondero Loop, Assembly members Hafen, Howdigi, Koenig, Monroe Moreno, O'Neill, Torres Fawcett, Yeager, and Chair Backus.
And I am present. On today's agenda, we have budget closings for the Department of Education, and we will follow that with public comment. For those wishing to provide public comment this morning, you may dial in to 888-475-4499. When prompted, provide meeting ID 876-842-0624. And then press the number sign. When prompted for participant ID, you also press the number sign. Public comment may be limited today to 2 minutes. And with that, we will go ahead and start with our Department of Education budget closing, and I will turn it over to staff to walk us through the closing documents.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Liliana Camacho-Poco, Fiscal Analysis Division. For the record, I will be presenting the first 2 closing budgets for today's closing. They start on page 3 of your packet, and the first budget account is 2675, Standards and Instructional Support, and this budget was heard by the subcommittee on March 13th. This budget account supports positions that coordinate monitoring and technical support of school districts and regional training program implementation of standards through the approval of textbooks and other instructional support measures. There is one major closing issue in this budget account, and it is for one new education program supervisor position. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $219,523 over the 25-27 biennium for one new education program supervisor position and associated expenses. Currently, there is a director in this budget account which oversees 22 total staff, 15 permanent state FTEs, and 7 contractor positions. If approved, this new education program supervisor position would assist and would be directly responsible for 10 positions, and they would assist with program management and evaluating education programs. And the Office of Teaching and Learning currently faces challenges aligning program implementation with the implementation of technology initiatives and integration of artificial intelligence. And during the hearing, the department indicated that if approved, the new education program supervisor would help distribute the workload of the current director, and that current workload includes overseeing multiple content areas, grants, the adoption of content standards, the instruction review process, and policy review and other administrative functions. The department also indicated it is behind in reviewing and implementing education programs and instructional materials. And the current content review cycle is every 10 years. And they indicate that there's a backlog in the content standard review. However, they did not provide statistics for this current backlog. And the department indicates the new position would prioritize the completion of dual credit regulations and streamline the review and approval of guidance documents, aiming to eliminate the current backlog within 12 months. And the decision for the subcommittee is at the bottom of page 4 of your packet. And does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $219,523 over the 25-27 biennium for one new education program supervisor position and associated expenses?
Thank you so much. With that, do I have a motion?
So moved as read by staff, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. Liliana Camacho-Poco for the record. There are 8 other closing items, 4 of which include technical adjustments on pages 5 through 6 of your packet. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 6. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing items 5, 6, and 8 be closed with the noted technical adjustments. Other closing item 7 be closed reflecting approval of budget amendment A 251892675 that would eliminate the recommended funding and request authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Thank you. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. With that, I'll turn it back over to staff to go to account 101-2712.
Thank you, Chair. Liliana Camacho Poco for the record. The next budget to be closed, as Chair stated, is 2712 on page 7 of your packet, the student and school support budget. And this budget account provides distribution and administration of federal grants, primarily the federal Title I assistance for Nevada schools. There are no major closing issues in this budget account, and there are 7 other closing items, 7 of which include technical adjustments on pages 7 through 8 of your packet. And I would note this budget account was heard by the subcommittee on March 13th. And the decision is on page 8, and fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 5 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 7 be closed with the noted technical adjustments. Other closing item 6 not be approved, and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you so much. We have a motion to approve as stated by staff from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? I will go to Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand for the online platform for low-performing schools. So for 26-27, what system will they use, being that the ESSER $3 are not available? How will they submit the plans?
Thank you for the question. Liliana Camacho Poco for the record. The department indicates that this platform is currently going, and these funds were requested to continue the funding through fiscal year 26. The department was needed to confirm the federal funding that would be available for this contract to continue. And once that is figured out, they would be able to bring forth our work program to the Interim Finance Committee to request those specific federal funds to fund the contract.
So the current contract runs through 27 regardless if they identify or come with a work program?
Thank you for the question, Liliana Camacho Poco for the record. Currently, the contract runs through fiscal year 26. So the department would need to work with the purchasing division to either amend the contract or extend and go out for a new contract for this particular system.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We're going to take a brief break to switch out staff for the next budget item. We'll call our meeting back to order, and I will turn this recommended closing over to Mr. Yakovlev for account 1012621.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Yuri Yakovlev, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. The next 7 budgets were all previously heard by the subcommittee. The Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness budget is on page 11, which was established during the 82nd session through Assembly Bill 400, and provides grants to school districts, sponsors of charter schools, and nonprofit organizations to support early childhood literacy and readiness programs. Assembly Bill 400 appropriated $70 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium to fund the budget. The major closing issue is pre-K and literacy programs funding. The governor's recommended budget as submitted recommends continuing the $70 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium as ongoing funding, but a budget amendment was submitted to remove the funding to address the structural deficit issue in the executive budget. Instead, the governor recommends this funding as a one-time general fund appropriation of $140 million in fiscal year 2026. In fiscal year 2024, the department indicated that due to the time needed to create an application and scoring process, and then for providers to set up classrooms and hire staff or expand or create new literacy programs, only $32.6 million of the $70 million was distributed, $5.3 million of which funded 665 pre-K seats and $27.3 million funded literacy programs. The department indicated over $60 million has been allocated in fiscal year 2025, a portion of which would fund 1,949 pre-K seats. The table on page 12 provides the department's projections for how the $70 million would be allocated between pre-K seats and literacy programs in the upcoming biennium, with the allocation towards pre-K seats increasing in the second year. During the budget hearing, the department indicated their priorities funding pre-K seats. The department further indicated the number of projected seats of 3,488 in fiscal year 2026 and 5,588 in fiscal year 2027 was based on feedback from existing subgrantees and an analysis of historical information. Both years would represent increases over the fiscal year 2025 allocated seat amount of 1,949, which according to the department, the providers have indicated they will have the staffing and physical space to accommodate the additional seats. The department's projections are also applying the recommended statewide base per pupil amount in the pupil-centered funding plan as amended for fiscal year 2026, which is $9,416. However, the decision before the subcommittee for this budget account is to determine the amount of funding for the programs currently reflected in this budget. The rate per pre-K seat will be discussed in the next budget. Aside from the Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness budget account, pre-K seats have been historically funded through the state pre-K program in the Office of Early Learning and Development budget account. Accordingly, the subcommittee may consider consolidating funding by appropriating funding for pre-K seats to the Office of Early Learning and Development and allow for the tracking of literacy program expenses separately. Provided unrestricted general fund revenues may be limited in the upcoming biennium, the subcommittee may also wish to consider providing funding for this program, utilizing the current seat rate of $8,410. When applied to the number of seats projected by the department, total pre-K seat cost would be $29.3 million in fiscal year 2026 and $47 million in fiscal year 2027. Furthermore, the subcommittee may consider not funding literacy programs as the department has indicated their priority is funding pre-K seats. Altogether, this would provide total general fund savings of $63.7 million over the biennium when compared to the $140 million recommendation. The decisions are on page 14, and I will stop for a motion after each section, starting with section A. Regarding the amount of funding to provide for the programs currently reflected in this budget account, does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $70 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund pre-K seats and literacy programs, as submitted by the governor? This option would allow the department the flexibility to utilize the total amount of these funds between pre-K seats or literacy programs. Or option 2, recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $29.3 million in fiscal year 2026 and $47 million in fiscal year 2027, which would be used to only fund pre-K seats. If the existing pre-K seat rate of $8,410 would be used in the 2025-27 biennium, this would fund 3,488 seats in fiscal year 2026 and 5,588 seats in fiscal year 2027 as projected by the department. However, the final count of seats to be funded would be determined based on the subcommittee's recommendation on the per-seat rate in the Office of Early Learning and Development budget account.
Thank you so much. With that, can I have a motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move to approve A, regarding the amount of funding to provide for programs currently reflected in this budget account, that I recommend approval of the general fund appropriations of $29.3 million in fiscal year '26 and $47 million in fiscal year '27, which will be used to only fund pre-K seats. This is option 2.
Thank you. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? I did want to just kind of comment that we received a lot of letters from parents to our Assembly Ways and Means exhibits. There was like over 150 emails and 30 letters in support of this budget item. With that, any other discussion or questions for staff? I'll go to Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably more of a question for NDE. I just want to know, is there some form of audit around the pre-K dollars to make sure that there's some form of teaching that is occurring on these sites?
Thank you, Ms. Peterson, for making your way up. We'll defer to NDE on this one.
Megan Peterson, for the record, Deputy Superintendent, Department of Education. As part of the standard grant process, there hasn't been an audit identified, but one could be requested.
Thank you for that, because it popped up because I got a chance to be around my, I don't know what it would call him, 4-year-old grandnephew, whatever, and there was no learning of sounds. There was nothing around coding, around words, and just simple the difference between a long vowel and a short vowel. I mean, an inability to even hold a pencil, which I was like, is that supposed to happen in first grade or kindergarten? This is just weirdness. And so I was just wondering, I felt like for that amount of money per child, there should be something that a child should know, especially around sounds. And that wasn't even evident for a 4-year-old. And I was like, what's happening in the universe? So that's what made me ask that question. I actually think there should be some audit. It's not a glorified babysitting program. It's supposed to be an early learning, help the child be in a better position. So when they go to kindergarten, when they go to first grade, they're actually stronger, not weaker. And so, anyway, that's my diatribe for the morning. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator Neal. We'll go to Chair Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much for the question, Senator Neal, and I appreciate your question. In pre-K, the skills would be different, and I only am speaking to this as a former kindergarten teacher and an early childhood holder of that certificate. Their social, emotional, physical, and language development is focused on. And yes, they might know how to hold a crayon or a pencil, but sounds may not be within that wide range of skills and concepts that we are teaching children in pre-K. So I think that having identified certain skills that we learn, say, in pre-K versus kindergarten versus first grade, just as I would not teach a first grade or fourth grade skills. So with that being said, that may give you a little bit of context, but I can talk to you more offline. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe, do we have any other discussion on the pending motion? Oh, we'll go back to Ms. Peterson, sorry.
Thank you, Megan Peterson, for the record. And I do want to clarify a little bit. We do have subrecipient monitoring that occurs, but those activities generally look at things like eligibility of the expenses. They're not necessarily looking at the impacts of the program. However, that would be something that, as part of an MTSS implementation and evaluating the effectiveness of the programs, that would be something as part of that framework, but not typically part of a financial audit that would occur. So just a little bit of clarity around those practices.
Thank you so much for that. With that, we have a pending motion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries, and I'll turn it back over to staff to go over B.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Section B regarding where the funding should be placed for the programs currently funded in this budget. Does the subcommittee wish to option A, recommend providing the general fund appropriations for both pre-K seats and literacy programs to this budget account? The early childhood literacy and readiness budget account is recommended by the governor. This option would continue funding pre-K seats through two separate budget accounts throughout the 2025-27 biennium. Or option 2, recommend appropriating the funds for the pre-K seats to the Office of Early Learning and Development budget account. This option would consolidate pre-K seat funding in one budget account throughout the 2025-27 biennium.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And on B, I would recommend approval of appropriating the funds for the pre-K seats to the Office of Early Learning and Development budget account. This option would consolidate pre-K seat funding in one budget account throughout the 25-27 biennium.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Section C regarding whether the funding for the programs currently reflected in this budget account should be ongoing or one-time. Does the subcommittee wish to option A, recommend providing the, or option 1, apologies, recommend providing the general fund appropriations through the 2025 Appropriations Act as initially recommended by the governor with the intent to provide the funding on an ongoing basis? Or option 2, recommend providing the funding as one-time general fund appropriations through separate legislation consistent with the recommendation reflected in Budget Amendment A251552621 to remove general fund appropriations from the Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness budget account. Fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary. If the subcommittee recommends providing one-time funding for this budget account through separate legislation, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to include general fund appropriations of $100 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to this budget account through the 2025 Appropriations Act to establish this budget account as an executive budget account subject to the State Budget Act, Chapter 353 of NRS, requiring the department to submit work programs for interim finance committee approval for certain budgetary changes.
Thank you so much. With that, may I have a motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move to recommend providing the general fund appropriations through the 2025 Appropriations Act as initially recommended by the governor with the intent to provide the funding on an ongoing basis, and move to allow fiscal staff to have the authority to make technical adjustments as necessary, as staff has indicated in red.
With that, we have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We'll go ahead and move on to our next budget account, 1012709, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Yakovlev.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The Office of Early Learning and Development is on page 17, which manages and administers programs for at-risk children who are ready for kindergarten and programs focused on improving access and quality of early childhood programs in the state. As previously mentioned, this budget account houses the state pre-K program. The first closing issue is the state pre-K program seat rate. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $24.8 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund the state pre-K program, which is the same level of general funds approved last session, but the department indicates an increase in the per seat rate. The bottom of page 17 through page 18 gives background information on the state pre-K program's funding. The table at the top of page 18 provides the amount of funding approved by the 2021 and 2023 legislatures, the number of seats funded, the per seat rate, which is $8,410 in each year of the respective biennia. The table at the bottom of the page provides how the approved funding in fiscal year 2024 was distributed to recipients and how many seats were actually funded. Moving on to page 19, the 2023 legislature approved Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds of $3.2 million in each year to fund 377 additional seats. As those federal funds expire, that level of funding is not recommended to be continued. However, the department indicated those seats would be maintained through the increase in pre-K seats funded through the Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness Budget Account funding. In this budget, the $24.8 million is projected to fund 2,634 seats in each year, which is 315 less than what was approved in fiscal year 2025. That is due to an increased rate per seat. The original projections provided by the department were based on a rate of 9,416 in each year, which is the statewide base per pupil amount in fiscal year 2026 in the pupil-centered funding plan as amended by the governor. However, Senate Bill 58, if passed, would tie the pre-K seat rate to the adjusted base per pupil rate in the pupil-centered funding plan, which varies per school district and charter school and varies per year. The table at the top of page 20 summarizes how many seats would be funded in the upcoming biennium based on the projections the department provided between this budget account and the early childhood budget account. However, these amounts are subject to change through the finalization of the pupil-centered funding plan and the decision of the subcommittee, which we will get to shortly. During the hearing, the department indicated the goal of Senate Bill 58 is to fund seats at the same rate as K-12 pupils in a move towards universal pre-K, and that the existing rate of $8,410, which was developed from fiscal year 2020 information, is not sufficient due to inflation. And if the rate is not increased, the program providers would need to utilize other funding sources to sustain their programs. The table on page 21 illustrates the pre-K seat rates if Senate Bill 58 passes, based on the current adjusted base per pupil amount recommended by the governor. The table indicates if the local education agency currently receives funding through the state pre-K program or not, how much their adjusted base per pupil amount is recommended to be, and the increase over the $8,410 that it would represent. Additionally, the subcommittee may consider maintaining the existing $8,410 rates, which would address the fluctuation that would occur under Senate Bill 58, or approve a rate tied to the final statewide base per pupil rate. Both of these scenarios are presented in the table on page 22. So does the subcommittee wish to A, recommend pre-K seats funded by the state pre-K program at a rate of $8,410 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium, which would maintain the current per seat rate approved by the 2021 and 2023 legislatures? Or B, recommend pre-K seats funded by the state pre-K program at a rate equal to the legislatively approved statewide base per pupil rate in the pupil-centered funding plan for fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027? Or C, recommend pre-K seats funded by the state pre-K program at a rate equal to the legislatively approved adjusted base per pupil rate for school districts and charter schools in the pupil-centered funding plan for fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027, consistent with the language in Senate Bill 58 or other enabling legislation.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and take a motion for recommendation to the joint committees.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move to recommend pre-K seats funded by the state pre-K program at a rate of $8,410 in each year of the 25-27 biennium, which would maintain the current seat rate approved by the 21 and 23 legislatures.
Second, Vice A, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondera Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Major closing issue 2 is the expiration of the federal preschool development grant, which funds activities meant to strengthen the state's early child care and education systems for children birth through age 5 and assist low income and disadvantaged children with entering kindergarten among other goals. This is a 3-year grant that expires 6 months into fiscal year 2026. The governor's recommended budget has this grant funding expenses in fiscal year 2026 in totality and fiscal year 2027, indicating the department may have expected the funding to be renewed. However, that is not the case, and the grant is expiring December 30th, 2026. Additionally, during the 2023 legislative session, the department testified the grant would fund pre-K seats, but as of the March 13th budget hearing, the grant did not. The department has since indicated the grant will fund 50 pre-K seats by the end of fiscal year 2025 through funding distributed to a nonprofit in Southern Nevada. Since the hearing, the department has indicated no cost extension has not been provided by the U.S. Department of Education, so the fiscal year 2027 authority should be eliminated, and the department will strive to expend the $9.5 million budgeted in fiscal year 2026. Accordingly, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to eliminate the grant funding in fiscal year 2027. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of eliminating expiring federal preschool grant funds of $9.3 million in fiscal year 2027 as reflected in the base budget, and providing fiscal staff with the authority to make technical adjustments as necessary?
Thank you so much. I will go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much. I would move to recommend approval of eliminating expiring federal preschool development grant funds of $9.3 million in fiscal year 27 as reflected in the base budget, and providing fiscal staff with the authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop. We have a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The third issue is a reduction in federal grant funding not reflected in the governor's recommended budget. The department receives federal child care and development block grant funds transferred from the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services, which funds the Quality Rating and Improvement System program. Purpose of the program is to support child care and preschool sites and assess and improve the quality of their programs through subgrants to various organizations for assessments, evaluations, and training activities. After the governor's recommended budget was finalized, fiscal staff was notified the transfer from the Division of Welfare would be reduced. After the budget hearing, the Division of Welfare indicated that due to the expiration of one-time COVID relief funding and in an attempt to reduce administrative costs, the division will directly subaward the federal funding to recipient organizations that the department was responsible for through their transfer. As a result, the transfer the department will receive is reduced substantially. Fiscal staff worked with the department and agreed $6.5 million should be budgeted each year and recommends a corresponding technical adjustment. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of reducing federal child care and development block grant funding transferred from the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services to $6.5 million each year of the 2025-27 biennium, and providing fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary?
Thank you so much. With that, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move to recommend as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Continue on page 25. The fourth issue is the transfer and funding source change of a contract that funds kindergarten assessments, which provide a comprehensive child profile for kindergarten students and informs instruction at the beginning of the school year. The base budget includes $459,717 in each year of contract expenses funded with the federal child care and development block grant. It is currently funded with COVID monies in the department's COVID-19 budget account. Typically, transfers from one budget to another and changes in funding source are included in an enhancement decision unit for the legislature's consideration. However, this was not. Additionally, due to the reduction in transfers from the Division of Welfare, the department indicates the contract should not move forward, but if another funding source is identified, a work program would be submitted in the interim. Accordingly, fiscal staff recommends this decision unit not be approved. Does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval of contract authority for kindergarten assessments and providing fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary?
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move to not recommend approval of the contract authority for kindergarten assessments and providing fiscal staff with authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Second.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The last major closing issue is a recommendation for one new education and information officer position funded with the federal preschool development grant funds of $92,112 in fiscal year 26 and the child care and development block grant funds of $112,665 in fiscal year 27. The department currently has two education information officer positions that onboard and support approximately 454 child care and preschool sites around the state that participate in the Quality Rating and Improvement System, which is a voluntary program. There is also a contract position funded with the preschool development grant that would be eliminated as the grant expires. The department indicates these positions are at a maximum workload. However, due to the expiration of the preschool development grants, the reduction in the child care and development block grants, and the governor's finance office not submitting a budget amendment to fund the position with general funds, the subcommittee could consider not approving this decision unit. If so, fiscal staff requests authority to reallocate the $92,112 in fiscal year 2026 in a manner consistent with other preschool development grant funds in the budget account. Does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval for one new education information officer position funded with federal preschool development grant funds of $92,112 in fiscal year 2026 and federal child care and development block grant funds of $112,665 in fiscal year 2027, given the concerns with the availability of these federal funds, and provide fiscal staff with authority to enter a technical adjustment to reallocate federal preschool development grant funds?
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, and I would move to not recommend approval for one new education information officer position funded with federal preschool development grant funds of $92,112 in fiscal year 2026 and federal child care and development block grants of $112,665 in fiscal year 27, given the concerns with the availability of these federal funds, and provide fiscal staff with the authority to enter technical adjustments to reallocate federal preschool development grant funds.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Don Darrell Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. This budget has two other closing items with noted technical adjustments to decrease software licenses and office rent. Fiscal staff recommends that other closing items 1 and 2 be closed with the noted technical adjustments to software licensing costs and non-state owned rent expense, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and take a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Don Darrell Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The educator effectiveness budget starts on page 31, which provides resources to support the certification of administrator and teacher preparation programs, professional development, the Nevada Educator Performance Framework, and supports the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. There's only one major closing issue, which is a recommendation for general fund appropriations of $250,000 in each year of the biennium for a contract with the National Center on Education and the Economy to continue supporting the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, which the esteemed Senator Don Darrell Loop serves on. The commission also established during the 2023, the commission was established during the 2023 legislative session and is charged with comparing Nevada's education policies to those of high-performing international and domestic education systems and to make recommendations for improvement. $250,000 was appropriated over the 2023-24 interim to fund a study by the National Center, which basically performed the comparison for the commission. Fiscal staff provides an overview of the study and the Commission's work and their policy recommendations made during the interim on the bottom of page 31 through page 32. The department indicates the National Center would perform 2 additional studies over the 2025-27 biennium to build off the momentum of the Commission's work, specifically to evaluate accountability measures for student success and long-term analysis to ensure the education accountability framework continuously improves. Finally, a budget amendment was submitted to remove this decision unit and include the funding in a one-time appropriation to address the structural deficit in the governor's recommended budget. These studies are one-time in nature, so not including them as ongoing funds would not have a negative impact on the budget, according to the department. Does the subcommittee wish to, option A, recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $250,000 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund studies by the National Center on Education and the Economy as recommended by the governor? Or B, recommend approval of budget amendment A251602612 to remove the general fund appropriations of $250,000 each year of the 2025-27 biennium from the educator effectiveness budget account for consideration as one-time general fund appropriation, as a one-time general fund appropriation of $500,000 provided through legislation.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to recommend B, which is the approval of Budget Amendment A251602612 to remove the general fund appropriation of $250,000 in each year of the biennium from the educator effectiveness budget account for consideration as a one-time general fund appropriation of $500,000 provided through the legislation.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yakovlev, for the record, there are 3 other closing items for this budget account with 1 technical adjustment to decrease non-state-owned rent. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 3 be closed with the noted technical adjustments, and fiscal staff requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Second.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously, and we'll go ahead and continue to account 1012721.
Yuri Yakovlev, for the record, the Safe and Respectful Learning budget is on page 35. The Office for a Safe and Respectful Learning Environment provides outreach and anti-bullying training. There are 3 major closing issues. First is a recommendation for an increase in the Safe Voice licensing fee funded with general funds of $129,000 in each year of the upcoming biennium. The Safe Voice platform is a tip line and website where individuals can report threats to the well-being of students. The licensing fee is paid by the Department of Education. Tips are reviewed by the Department of Public Safety, and school administrators also investigate. The table on page 36 provides how many tips have been reported since the inception of the platform. There is a large spike in tips from 2022 to 2023, which was maintained in 2024. The department indicated there is more awareness of the platform, greater concerns of bullying and mental health, among other factors that have contributed to this. During the budget hearing, the department indicated an analysis was performed in 2019 that found the platform led to a 32% reduction in violence against school staff and possession of weapons, but no impact on bullying and suicide rates, and also reported the top 5 complaints received in 2024, which are noted on page 37. The department indicates the increased licensing fee is due to an amended contract that provides 2 additional services, a behavioral threat assessment and a suicide assessment. These services also provide school and county-specific training on dealing with these threats. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $129,000 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund an increase in the software licensing fee for the Safe Voice tip line as recommended by the governor?
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I would move to approve as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Gary Yakovlev for the record. Next is the expiration of the federal school-based mental health services grant, which is subgranted to schools to recruit and hire mental health professionals like counselors, psychologists, and social workers, along with funding provided to universities for workforce development of mental health professionals. The grant expires 3 months into fiscal year 2026. The governor recommends eliminating grant-funded expenditures and an existing education program's professional position that oversees the implementation and administration of the program. The position is currently filled. Fiscal staff asked the department if consideration was made on repurposing the position. During the budget hearing, the department indicated mental health services have traditionally been funded with discretionary federal funds, which are not available right now, so the department has not been able to identify another funding source. Additionally, the department indicates that school districts would need to absorb the cost of the ongoing personnel and services with existing funding sources or eliminate positions after this grant expires. Fiscal staff worked with the department and a projection was provided indicating $1 million of grant funding would be available in fiscal year 2026. So fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to reduce school-based mental health services grant funding to $1 million with corresponding reductions to associated expenditures in fiscal year 2026 and to eliminate the $14,841 of expenditures in fiscal year 2027 with a corresponding decrease in general fund appropriations due to grant-funded expenditures being noted as funded with general funds. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of eliminating federal school-based mental health services grant funds expiring September 30th, 2025 and the associated education professionals position with the noted technical adjustments?
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Gary Yakovlev for the record. The last major closing issue is the expiration of federal Now is the Time initiative grant funds, which expire 3 months into fiscal year 26, and the governor is recommending eliminating another education program's professional position and grant-funded expenses. The grant funds Project Aware, which funds an infrastructure for school-based mental health programs and services and builds partnerships between schools and community-based providers of behavioral health care services. The department indicates the grant assisted approximately 7,000 personnel in receiving professional development in suicide detection and prevention, acceptance and commitment therapy, restorative practices, and multi-tiered systems of support. Once again, during the budget hearing, the department indicated discretionary federal funds are not available and there are not any other funding sources currently available. If subrecipients want to continue funding the cost of the program, they would need to do that with their own revenue sources. The department provided an updated budget to fiscal staff indicating $1.4 million would be available in fiscal year 2026, so fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to reduce federal Now is the Time initiative grant funding to $1.4 million with corresponding reductions to associated expenditures in fiscal year 2026, and eliminate grant revenues of $41,171 and expenditures of $34,969 with an increase in general fund appropriations of $6,202 in fiscal year 2027. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of eliminating federal Now is the Time initiative grant funds expiring September 30th, 2025 and the associated education program's professional position with the noted technical adjustments?
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. There are 3 other closing items, 2 of which have technical adjustments for office rent and federal grant funding alignment. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item 1 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing items 2 and 3 be closed with the noted technical adjustments to correct non-state-owned rent expense, change the funding source of an existing position, and align federal grant revenues, and request authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We'll go ahead to our next budget account, 1012699, regarding other state education programs, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Yakovlev.
Yuri Yakovlev, for the record, the other state education programs budget starts on page 45. This budget is designed to accommodate grants and other programs funded by the state for pass-through to school districts, charter schools, and other entities for various education programs. First closing issue is a recommendation to continue funding the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program through $6.8 million in general fund appropriations in each year of the 2025-27 biennium, though a budget amendment was submitted to provide the funding through a one-shot appropriation. This program was created during the 2021-23 interim and funded with federal COVID monies. The 2023 legislature approved continuing the program with general funds of $6.8 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium and directed the department to remove the program from the budget and request continuing it through an enhancement, which is what is being presented today. The program provides tuition assistance to students in their final 3 semesters of a traditional pathway licensure program, so an education program that results in an education degree, for example. The program also provides stipends to students in their student teaching semester. During the 23-24 interim, the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation, which I'll refer to as DETR, transferred wage assessment revenues of $1.1 million in fiscal year 24 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 25 to expand the program. The governor's recommended budget does not include these transfers in the upcoming biennium, but DETR has indicated $2.4 million would be available in fiscal year 26, which I'll discuss in further detail in a moment. The table at the bottom of page 46 provides how many students receive stipends and tuition assistance awards from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 25 to date as reported by the department. There was a large decrease in the number of students that were projected to receive financial supports in fiscal year 24 versus the actual number that did. Specifically, the 1,316 students for each award in the fiscal year 24 projection was based on applications submitted by providers to the department and would be funded with the $6.8 million in general funds and $1.1 million in DETR transfers. Ultimately, $6.9 million was expended in fiscal year 24 for only 506 stipend and 76 tuition assistance awards. And the amount that students were awarded on average for tuition assistance and stipends increased compared to the amounts provided during the 22-23 interim, which is noted at the top of page 47. The department cannot determine the exact cause, as statute does not limit the amount of an award, so program providers decide how to administer their awarded funding through stipends or tuition assistance. Moving on to the bottom of page 47, fiscal staff has broken out the decisions for the subcommittee into various sections regarding the funding of the program and establishing structure. I'll pause for a motion after each section. As previously noted, a budget amendment was submitted to remove the $6.8 million per year as ongoing funding and included in a one-shot of $13.6 million in fiscal year 2026 to address the structural deficit. The department indicates this would introduce instability as students may receive funding in one year but not the next. Does the subcommittee wish to A, recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $6.8 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium to fund the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program as recommended by the governor as submitted, or B, recommend approval of budget amendment A2515-82699 to remove general fund appropriations of $6.8 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium from the other state education programs budget account, and consider a one-time general fund appropriation of $13.6 million in fiscal year 2026 provided through separate legislation.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would recommend option B, which is the approval of Budget Amendment A251582-699 to remove general fund appropriations of $6.8 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium from the other state education programs budget account and consider a one-time general fund appropriation of $13.6 million in fiscal year 26 provided through separate legislation.
We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion unanimously carries.
Yuri Yakovlev, for the record, after the budget hearing, a budget amendment was submitted to transfer $2.4 million in wage assessment revenues from DETR in fiscal year 2026. This would provide an inconsistent level of funding over the biennium, so the subcommittee may consider recommending an additional $2.4 million in fiscal year 2027. Additionally, the subcommittee may consider offsetting the general funds in this budget account with the DETR funds, considering unrestricted general fund revenues may be limited in the upcoming biennium, and establish budget policy that the DETR funding be expended first. Moving on to the decisions on page 49, I'll start with section A and pause for a motion. Regarding the inclusion of wage assessment revenue in this budget account, does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend approval of budget amendment A257072699 to include wage assessment revenues of $2.4 million transferred from the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation fiscal year 26 only, and establish budget policy that the department utilize wage assessment revenue before expending general fund appropriations for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program. Or option 2, recommend approval of budget amendment A257072699 to include wage assessment revenues of $2.4 million transferred from the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation in fiscal year 2026, and approval of an additional $2.4 million in fiscal year 2027 from wage assessment revenues, and establish budget policy that the department utilize wage assessment revenue before expending general fund appropriations for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program.
With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve A2, which is the approval of budget amendment 257072699 to include wage assessment revenues of $2.4 million transferred from the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation in fiscal year 26, and approval of additional $2.4 million in fiscal year 27 from wage assessment revenues, and establish budget policy that NDE utilize wage assessment revenue before expending general fund appropriations for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero-Loop. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Section B regarding whether the wage assessment revenue considered in decision A would increase or maintain the level of funding for the program. Does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend reducing general fund appropriations provided for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program by the same amount provided by the wage assessment revenues from the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation to provide total funding of $6.8 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium, consistent with the level of funding approved by the 2023 legislature. Or 2, recommend the wage assessment revenues increase funding for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program beyond the annual funding level of $6.8 million recommended by the governor and approved by the 2023 legislature.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on this one, I would move to approve B1, which is reducing the general fund appropriations as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero-Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The next decision deals with structuring the program to reduce the variability previously noted and a potential duplication fiscal staff has noted. Regarding variability, the parameters used during the 2021-23 biennium are not being used in the current biennium as indicated through the increased average stipend and tuition funding in fiscal year 24. The department indicates a consistent level of funding could be a maximum of $12,000 per student, but to allow program providers to determine how to distribute the amount between stipends and tuition assistance. This may result in awards not being uniform or equitably distributed among students. Alternatively, the subcommittee could recommend the same parameters utilized during the 21-23 biennium, but with increased amounts per stipend and tuition assistance noted towards the middle of page 5 in the arrow bullet points, which would result in a total maximum award of $12,000 per student. Regarding the duplication, this program, as well as the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, provide awards for students in traditional pathway licensure programs. The department indicates they advise program providers that Teach Nevada Scholarship Program funds only be used to fund students in their first 3 years of a licensure program, and the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching funds be used for students in their final year of a program. So there is no duplication occurring. However, timely or accurate records may not be being maintained, so whether duplication is occurring cannot be determined. Accordingly, the subcommittee could recommend statute be amended so that the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program only provide stipends since tuition is covered by the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program. Moving on to the decisions on page 51, starting with section A. Regarding the benefit funding that would be provided through the program, does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend approval to establish parameters to fund stipends at a rate of $700 per week up to 12 weeks and tuition assistance at a rate of $250 per credit up to 8 credits, which aligns with the structure initially established over the 2021-23 biennium? Or 2, recommend approval to establish parameters to fund stipends at a rate of $800 per week up to 12 weeks and tuition assistance at a rate of $300 per credit up to 8 credits, and provide a maximum of $12,000 per student to align with the Department of Education's recommendation to limit funding per student to $12,000. Or 3, recommend approval to provide a maximum of $12,000 per student and not utilize parameters, allowing program providers to determine how to distribute the $12,000 between stipends and tuition awards per student. This option provides the program providers flexibility on how much funding may be awarded per student. If any of these options are selected, fiscal staff requests approval to include language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill to establish parameters for the distribution of program funding based on the subcommittee's recommendation.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve A2, to recommend approval to establish parameters to fund stipends at the rate of $800 per week up to 12 weeks and tuition assistance at the rate of $300 per credit up to 8 credits, and provide a maximum of $12,000 per student to align with the Department of Education's recommendation to limit funding per student to $12,000, and move to approve also fiscal staff as read by staff.
Thank you so much. We have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Section B regarding the participant benefits that would be funded by the program. Does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend approval of the governor's recommended budget, which includes no changes to the structure of the program, allowing for both stipend and tuition assistance awards? Or 2, recommend approval of only providing stipends to be awarded through this program in recognition that the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program is available to provide tuition assistance. If this option is selected, legislation could also be recommended by the subcommittee to amend NRS 391A-705 and NRS 391A-710 to eliminate the program's authority to provide tuition assistance awards.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, and I would move to approve B2 in this instance, by recommending the approval of only providing stipends to be awarded through this program in recognition that the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program is available to provide tuition assistance, and also recommend that the subcommittee amend NRS 391A.705 and NRS 391A.710 to eliminate the program's authority to provide tuition assistance awards.
Second.
Thank you. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. The second major closing issue is a request from the department to omit restrictive language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill regarding state career and technical education funds, which I'll refer to as CTE. As background, this budget account has general fund appropriations that fund career and technical education activities in district schools and charter schools. Prior to the 2017 legislative session, NRS 388 had a methodology for the distribution of the state funds appropriated for CTE. Specifically, 5% should have been distributed to pupil organizations. These pupil organizations are called career and technical student organizations, and they currently provide leadership development programs for students and teachers. Since the distribution in NRS was based on a percentage, whenever general funds increased, the amount allocated to career and technical student organizations would also increase, regardless of the need or justification from those organizations. So the 2015 legislature approved the language in the K-12 funding bill that overrode NRS and disallowed the use of the state funds for the pupil organizations and training and leadership activities. And that language has been included in funding bills since. However, the 2017 legislature amended NRS, and now the language says up to 5%. So even though there's flexibility, the restrictive language has still been used. The pupil organizations currently receive funding out of the Career and Technical Education budget account through the federal Carl D. Perkins grant. The department indicated there was a change in the U.S. Department of Education's policy for the grant, and they have limited the amount per organization to $20,000 per year. As such, students and their families now have to pay the cost of participating in the organizations. During the budget hearing, the department indicated school districts fund a portion of these organizations, but students and their families have to pay the cost of participation still. This is because CTE is now part of core curriculum or the pupil-centered funding plan model, so according to the department, districts are not required to bear the full cost. If the language was removed, districts would be able to utilize their state CTE funds for this purpose. The level of funding was not specified, though, by the department. The department further indicated that teachers are unable to teach dual credit CTE courses in schools because they lack the credentials needed, and if the restrictive language was omitted, the state funding could be used for this purpose. During the hearing, the department indicated school district professional development is focused on core curriculum, which CTE is not, and significant resources are needed to become dual credit certified, but did not elaborate on those resources. Finally, NRS 3888 allows this budget account to balance forward unexpended general funds. However, language has been included in K-12 funding bills requiring the unexpended funds to revert to the general fund at the end of each year. The department indicates that allowing unexpended funds to balance forward would help meet the maintenance of effort requirement for the federal Perkins grant, and that the department was not able to meet the requirement in January of 2024 because school districts did not spend down their general fund allocations from this budget due to supply chain issues and the timing of hiring CTE teachers. It is unclear how the removal of this language would impact the maintenance of efforts, since this may reduce state funding in one year and increase it in another when compared to the legislatively approved level of funding. Given this, it appears the NDE should further review the proposal to change restrictive language. If I could direct your attention to page 55. Section A is regarding the historic restrictive language removing the authority to utilize state career and technical education funding for leadership and training activities and pupil organizations. Does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend omitting the historic restrictive language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill, which would allow the Department of Education to utilize state career and technical education funding for leadership and training activities and pupil organizations as allowed by NRS 388.392? Or option 2, recommend retaining the historic restrictive language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill, which would not allow the Department of Education to utilize state and career technical education funding for leadership and training activities and pupil organizations otherwise allowed by NRS 388.392.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would move to recommend A1 and recommend omitting the historic restrictive language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill, which would allow the Department of Education to utilize the state career and technical education funding for leadership and training activities and pupil organizations as allowed by NRS 388.392.
Second.
With that, I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'll go to Assemblymember Koenig.
Yeah, thank you for this decision. I had a lot of input from my rural school districts, and the other choice would have really wiped out the career and technical education programs. And so by this decision, it's helping them maintain that in their schools.
We'll next go to Assemblymember Torres Fawcett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note the work, too, of the students. I know I had several student groups reach out to me. I know one of the gentlemen is here today. So good job making sure that you brought this to our awareness. And I know that school leaders have also reached out about this specific issue. And this will really allow for schools to use this funding so that it doesn't have to come out of the pockets of students. So we're really helping students ensure that they can participate in these career technical student organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yaakov for the record. Section B, regarding the historic revisionary language that did not provide the Department of Education with authority to balance forward funds at the end of a fiscal year. Does the subcommittee wish to, option 1, recommend retaining the historic revisionary language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill, which would not allow the Department of Education to balance forward unexpended state career and technical education funding at the end of the fiscal year, and recommend legislation be drafted to amend NRS 388.397 to remove the Department of Education's authority to balance forward unexpended state and career technical education funding at the end of a fiscal year. If this option is selected, it would eliminate the conflict of language between statute and the K-12 education funding bill. Or option 2, recommend retaining the historic revisionary language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill, which would not allow the Department of Education to balance forward unexpended state and career technical education funding at the end of the fiscal year, with no changes in statute. If this option is selected, it would maintain a conflict of language between statute and the K-12 education funding bill. If either option B1 or B2 is chosen, the Department of Education could study the potential impact of the state's maintenance of effort requirements for the federal Carl D. Perkins grant if state funding for programs of career and technical education is allowed to balance forward at the end of a fiscal year. Any recommendations could be brought forward by the department for consideration by the 84th, the 2027 legislature.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve B1 as read by staff, along with the potential study if B1 is chosen.
Thank you so much. With that, I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Yuri Yaakov for the record. The third closing issue is a recommendation for increased funding to the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program through additional general fund appropriations of $314,293 in each year of the biennium. Jobs for America's Graduates is a statewide nonprofit organization, and Jobs for Nevada's Graduates is the nonprofit that is the Nevada affiliate. I'll refer to the organization as JAG Nevada going forward. JAG Nevada helps incoming high school seniors that are at risk of not graduating and then provides a year of support after high school to assist with employment acquisition or furthering their education. Fiscal staff provides background information on the program starting on page 56. Due to a budget reduction during the COVID-19 pandemic, $3.6 million in state funding per year has been maintained since fiscal year 2021. Any additional funds for the program were placed in reserves by prior legislatures, and JAG Nevada was required to raise matching funds from non-state sources in order to access the funds in reserve. JAG Nevada indicates that due to the budget reduction, the number of programs offered and schools served decreased. Additionally, salaries of staff were restructured in fiscal year 2025 in order to stay competitive in the job market. But with the rising costs, JAG Nevada indicates up to 4 programs would need to be cut, resulting in up to 240 students not being served and 4 staff potentially being laid off if the $314,000 per year is not approved. After the budget hearing, the organization's fiscal year 2025 budgeted revenues was provided, which indicates total revenues of $6.4 million, inclusive of state funding of $4.2 million. As previously indicated, legislatively approved state funding was $3.6 million, and JAG Nevada indicated the difference of approximately $808,000 was unexpended state funding that was balanced forward from fiscal year 2024. Additionally, the current average program cost after the inflationary increases and salary restructure is $115,000. The organization currently operates 52 programs, which would indicate total program costs of $6 million per year at the $115,000 average. JAG Nevada indicated the funding of $6.4 million would remain stable. But of the non-state funding that's budgeted, there are federal funds of $259,194 and transfers from school districts totaling $616,000. With the uncertainty of federal and local funding, the subcommittee may consider appropriating the funding to the other state education programs reserve and require the department submit a work program if JAG Nevada's federal or local revenues are not received as budgeted, and the $314,293 would be needed to maintain the 52 current programs. So on page 58, does the subcommittee wish to A, recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $314,293 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to increase funding for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program, as recommended by the governor. Or B, recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $314,293 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium, but placing this funding in the reserve category within the other state education programs budget account, and requiring the Nevada Department of Education to submit a work program to access the funds if federal or local revenues are not received as budgeted for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program. That would lead to program reductions. Fiscal staff requests authority to provide appropriate language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill if this option is selected by the subcommittee. Or C, recommend not approving general fund appropriations of $314,293 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to increase funding for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve B as read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
There are 4 other closing items, one with the technical adjustment to not approve a decision unit that the department indicates was inadvertently included in the budget. Accordingly, fiscal staff recommends the other closing item 1 not be approved, the language indicated in other closing items 2 through 4 be included in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill, and request authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. Can I entertain a motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move to approve other closing item number 1 not be approved. The language indicated in other closing items 2 through 4 be included in the 25 K-12 education funding bill, and request authority to make technical adjustments for staff as necessary.
I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdigy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. We'll go to our next budget account, 1012718 for Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, and turn it back over to Mr. Yakovlev.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. I promise I'm almost out of your hair. The next budget is the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program on page 61. This program provides awards to providers of alternative licensure or traditional licensure programs who then provide scholarships to students. Pursuant to statute, students get 75% of the award up front. After teaching for 5 years, they are eligible to receive the remaining 25%. And providers of the programs receive $1,000 per student that successfully completes a program. There is one major issue, which is the funding of the program. The base budget included $2.7 million extra in general fund appropriations in fiscal year 2026 over what was legislatively approved in fiscal year 25. There was not any justification or reasoning provided. It wasn't included in an enhancement decision unit for the legislature's consideration, and the governor's finance office indicated the amount was included inadvertently, and a budget amendment was submitted to remove it. However, there were issues in the administration of the program that were discussed during the budget hearing. During the 2023 legislative session, the governor recommended increasing funding for the program by $3.2 million in each year. But the department was not able to reconcile the program from inception to date to show how many students received scholarships and how many withdrew from the program, with their 25% set-aside funds being available for redistribution. As such, the legislature appropriated the funds to the IFC contingency account and required the department to reconcile the account in order to get those funds. The department has not received the funding, and during the budget hearing indicated there was a misunderstanding of the intent and believed existing funding needed to be expended first. The department indicates it will request the $3.2 million available in fiscal year 2025 by the end of fiscal year 2025. Additionally, the department has been unable to reconcile program funding, which it attributes to program leadership turnover and an inability to locate records that would substantiate the funding provided to program providers and participant information in fiscal years 2016 and 2017. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommended budget as submitted, reflecting total general fund appropriations of $5.1 million in fiscal year 2026 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2027 for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program? Or B, approval of the governor's recommended budget and budget amendment A254212-718, which would provide general fund appropriations of $2.4 million in fiscal year 2026 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 2027 for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program. Fiscal staff requests authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. With that, I will accept a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And with this, I would move to recommend option B, that the subcommittee recommend approval of the governor's recommended budget and the budget amendment A254212-718, which would provide general fund appropriations of $2.4 million in the fiscal year 26 and $2.4 million in fiscal year 27 for the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program and for fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. However, I move the subcommittee also recommend issuing a letter of intent to the Department of Education requiring the department to reconcile the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program participation and funding on a semi-annual basis starting in fiscal year 26 with reports due to the Interim Finance Committee no later than January 31st and July 31st of each year of the 25-27 biennium.
Thank you so much. With that, do we have, a second?
Second.
I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdegi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. And we'll go to our next budget account, 1012622 for Nevada Teach Advancement Scholarship. And I'll turn it back over to Mr. Yakovlev for his last budget account.
It has been a pleasure. The Nevada Teacher Advancement Scholarship Program is on page 65 as indicated. This program was created last session to fund scholarships for students pursuing a master's degree in education or a related field. There is not any funding recommended in this budget to continue the program, but there is one major issue, which is a recommendation by the governor to fund a future liability of $323,628 in general fund appropriations. Pursuant to statute, the scholarship recipient receives 75% of the scholarship up front, similar to the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, and then 25% upon completing their master's program and maintaining employment as a teacher for 3 consecutive years. Additionally, the department must pay $1,000 to the program providers for every student that successfully completes their program. The table on page 66 provides the amount that has been distributed in fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 to date for that 75% upfront scholarship amount. Considering funds were awarded in both fiscal years, there is a future liability. The program was funded with one-time general fund appropriations during the 2023-24 interim, and the unexpended funds have to revert back to the general fund. During the budget hearing, the department indicated the reserves in fiscal year 25 would be utilized to pay future liabilities, but as just noted, the unexpended Assembly Bill 400 appropriations revert back to the general fund at the end of fiscal year 25. So those reserves would not be available in fiscal year 26. The $323,000 recommendation only funds the 25% liability associated with the fiscal year 24 awards. The department testified they plan on distributing $1.5 million in fiscal year 25, which would create an additional future liability of $500,000, which is the 25% set-aside funds that would need to be paid out to a program participant if they meet the 3-year teaching requirement, among other requirements. That future liability is now being considered, and the governor's recommendation also does not appear to consider the $1,000 payments to providers. The table on page 68 outlines fiscal staff's estimated future liability based on updated information from the department, which is $739,000, $500,000 of which for the 25% liability and $239,000 for the provider payments, which the subcommittee could recommend as additional funding. Considering the $1,000 payments are due when a student completes an education program, the department may be liable in fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027 for a portion or all of that $239,000, which the governor's recommendation could cover. Regarding the 25% liability, some participants may finish their 3-year teaching requirement in fiscal year 27 if they completed an accelerated program, but the majority may be due in the 2027-29 biennium. So the subcommittee could recommend approving the governor's recommendation and then direct the NDE to prepay program providers with the $500,000 that's in reserves now before fiscal year 2025 closes. and issue a letter of intent directing the department to reconcile the program in the interim to determine the future liability, and that information would be utilized when the governor builds their budget for the 2027 legislative session. Does the subcommittee wish to, option A, recommend approving a general fund appropriation of $323,628 in fiscal year 2026 to fund the potential future 25% payout associated with fiscal year 2024 participating students as recommended by the governor, and an additional general fund appropriation of $739,000 in fiscal year 2026 to fund the potential future 25% payout associated with fiscal year 2025 participating students and costs associated with fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 provider payments. Or, option B, recommend approving a general fund appropriation of $323,628 in fiscal year 2026, as recommended by the governor, and issuing a letter of intent to the Department of Education requiring the department to reconcile the Nevada Teacher Advancement Scholarship Program participation and associated future liabilities due no later than July 31st, 2026, for consideration when developing the budget for the 2027-29 biennium, and directing the ND to utilize the $500,000 in remaining authority in fiscal year 2025 to pay all provider payments for awards given over the 2023-25 biennium. Fiscal staff requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. May I entertain a motion on this item?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I move to recommend option B, that the subcommittee recommend approving a general fund appropriation of $323,628 in fiscal year 26, as recommended by the governor, and issuing a letter of intent to the Department of Education requiring the department to reconcile the Nevada Teacher Advancement Scholarship Program participation and associated future liabilities that would be due to the Interim Finance Committee no later than July 31st, 2026, for consideration by the agency when developing its budget for the 27-29 biennium, directing the NDE to utilize the $500,000 in remaining authority in fiscal year 25 to pay all provider payments for awards given over the 23-25 biennium, and for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. In addition, Madam Chair, I would move that the subcommittees also recommend the letter of intent for this budget include a requirement that the program be reconciled along with the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program on a semi-annual basis starting in fiscal year 26, with reports due to the Interim Finance Committee no later than January 31st and July 31st of each year of the 25-27 biennium.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Don Darrow Loop.
Second.
I have a second from Majority Leader Howdegi. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion unanimously carries. And with that, I believe we'll take a little brief break so that we can change out our fiscal staff. We can go ahead and call this meeting back to order. We're going to go to account 1012710 for closing, and this is for COVID-19 funding. And so welcome, Mr. Malone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Malone, LCB Fiscal. For the record, I will be bringing the subcommittee through the final three budgets this morning. The first one, 101-2710, which the committee or the subcommittee has heard previously, and the remaining two are staff closings, which the committee has not heard previously. Budget account 2710 begins on page 71 of your packet, and this is the COVID-19 funding budget account, which contains federal funding provided for K-12 education in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The table on the bottom of page 71 provides an overview of the awards, the federal awards that were provided to the Department of Education that was distributed to the local school districts and utilized for various projects, these being the elementary and secondary school emergency relief, 1, 2, and 3, commonly referred to as ESSER 3 funds, and the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, 1 and 2, GEAR, commonly referred to as GEAR funds, and then also the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools. In total, the Department of Education has received awards of $1.743 billion since the inception of this budget account. The governor, so there's one major issue, which is an update on the COVID-19 pandemic funding for K-12 education. Inclusive of all decision units, the governor recommends total funding of $57.6 million in fiscal year 2026 to continue projects funded under the ESSER 3, the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools, and the ARPA Homeless Children and Youth Program Grant Awards. In summary, all federal funding for K-12 education in response to the COVID-19 pandemic has either expired or met its grant obligation deadline. Decision Unit E490 reflects the expiring grant awards within the governor's recommended budget for fiscal year 2027 and a reduction in fiscal year 2026. However, at the time that the budget was built, there were liquidation extension awards granted to continue liquidating funds using ESSER 3 Emergency Assistance to Non-Public School programs built within the governor's recommended budget. For ESSER 3 funding, the Department of Education did provide a breakdown as of December 31st, 2024 of the various projects that they were liquidating over in fiscal year 2025 and over the next biennium. And that's represented in the table on page 73. This table is somewhat outdated as we've received additional information from the Department of Education that they have further liquidated these funds, which we do not at this time have a reconciled version of those programs as of today. In addition to the ESSER 3 funds, the governor's recommended budget includes emergency assistance to non-public school funding of $4.5 million in fiscal year 2026, which reflects the liquidation extension amount approved by the U.S. federal government. In addition, there is $180,819 in ARPA homeless children and youth funding budgeted for fiscal year 2026. During the hearing on March 13, 2025, the subcommittee expressed concerns about providing the Department of Education the appropriate level of expenditure authority to align with federally approved liquidation extension requests. So the table on page 74 provides an overview at the time of federal funding awarded, or federal extension amounts approved to the Department of Education, the liquidation extension date, and the projected fiscal year 2026 authority remaining of projects. So of the $46.4 million that was provided an extension amount, $20.2 million is remaining as reported by the Department of Education. On March 28, 2025, however, the Department of Education received a letter from the U.S. Department of Education modifying the approved liquidation obligation dates. According to the letter, the U.S. Department of Education concluded that further extension of the liquidation period for the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations and American Rescue Plan Act grants, which are past the period of performance, was not justified, and amended the period for liquidation to end on March 28, 2025 at 5 p.m., 2 p.m. Pacific Time, which is 1 year earlier than the previously approved liquidation extension period of March 28, 2026. However, The letter did include an opportunity that would allow the U.S. Department of Education to submit reapproval for liquidation extension requests that would be reviewed on an individual project-specific basis by the U.S. Department of Education. In response to this letter, the Department of Education issued letters directing contractors to cease work until their specific project is possibly reapproved by the U.S. Department of Education. In addition, the department reports reducing temporary contract personnel to 4 positions, which were utilized to reconcile remaining invoices. The salaries of the remaining personnel are to be funded with other eligible federal funding sources or savings in other expenditure categories as reported by the Department of Education. Although there is uncertainty of federal reapprovals, the Department of Education requests expenditure authority in fiscal year 2026 to expedite fund liquidation without needing to first seek IFC approval should the U.S. Department of Education grant an extension. So staff has provided 2 options for the subcommittee's consideration. Option A, which would provide the Department of Education authority to receive limited federal COVID-19 pandemic funds in fiscal year 2026. This option would provide authority of $20.2 million in fiscal year 2026 to align with the remaining balance of funds from the liquidation extension requests. However, providing this authority could risk the Department of Education authorizing expenditures before receiving U.S. Department of Education reapproval. Accordingly, if this option is selected, the subcommittee may also wish to recommend directing the Department of Education to submit work programs to adjust its expenditure authority to match the actual reapproved liquidation extension requests once determined by the U.S. Department of Education. Alternatively, option B would eliminate the authority to the Department of Education to receive most federal COVID-19 pandemic funds in the 25-27 biennium. This option would require work programs be submitted to the Interim Finance Committee for approval once the federal U.S. Department of Education provided reapprovals of the extension requests. In the event that they need to expedite the liquidation of the funds, the Governor's Finance Office could submit a 15-day expeditious action work program pursuant to NRS 353220. So, does the committee wish to A, recommend authorizing $20 million in ESSER 3 funds and $180,819 in homeless children and youth funds in fiscal year 2026 only, and directing the NDE to submit work programs to adjust the authority to match the actual reapproved liquidation extension request once determined by the U.S. Department of Education, or B, recommend not authorizing any ESSER 3 emergency assistance to non-public schools and ARPA homeless children and youth program funding in fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027, which would generally require IFC approval over the 25-27 biennium prior to liquidating any reapproved liquidation extension requests.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malone. I feel like I'm on a sine curve when it comes to whether we're going to have federal money or not over the last month. So I appreciate you guys keeping on top of that. So with that, I'll go ahead and accept a motion from Chair Dondero-Luke.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with you. And so with this, I would move to recommend B, that we recommend not authorizing any ESSER 3 emergency assistance to non-public schools and ARPA homeless children and youth program funding in fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27, which would generally require IFC approval over the 25-27 biennium prior to liquidating any reapproved liquidation extension requests.
I appreciate that. I have a first from Chair Dondero-Luke, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Malone again for the record. There is one other closing item in this budget account on the bottom of page 76. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed with the noted technical adjustment and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
That one's pretty easy. With that, I'll take a motion.
So moved as read by staff.
Second. I have a first from Chair Dondero-Luke, a second from Majority Leader Howdiggy. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. And we can go to account 1012616 for the retirement credit purchase program, and I'll turn it back to Mr. Malone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for the next two budget accounts, these are staff closes. Fiscal staff is responsible for develop closing recommendations for these budget accounts. The subcommittee has not previously reviewed these budgets. I will go through both of them momentarily, and then at the end, I will take one motion for the approval for both. The first budget account being 1012616. This begins on page 77. This is the 1/5 retirement credit purchase program. This budget is required, provides funding for the required purchase of 1/5 of a year of retirement service credits for teachers in at-risk schools, school psychologists, and teachers in the fields of mathematics, science, special education, and English as a second language for teachers who are enrolled in the program prior to July 1st, 2007. There are no major closing issues. There is one other closing item, which is language in the K-12 Education Bill to provide the Department of Education the authority to transfer general fund appropriations between fiscal years of the 23-25 biennium. The next staff closed budget begins on page 79. This is budget account 1012672. This is the account for alternative schools. This budget account supports the licensure and regulation of private schools funded with general fund appropriations and private school license and fee revenues. There are three other closing items in this budget account, including other closing item 1, which recommends the legislature direct the Department of Education to expend balance forward funds and license and fee revenue prior to expending general fund appropriations. In summary, as previously noted, fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations for the following budget accounts. To assist with the closing, fiscal staff has identified the budget accounts that are recommended to be closed as recommended by the governor, along with identified technical adjustments that are recommended below. Fiscal staff recommends that the following budget accounts be closed as recommended by the governor, with the technical adjustments noted, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. 1012616, NDE 1/5 Retirement Credit Purchase Program, including authority for staff to include language in the 2025 K-12 Education Funding Bill to allow general fund appropriation transfers with interim finance committee approval between fiscal years for the 25-27 biennium. And budget account 1012672 NDE account for alternative schools, including directing the NDE to utilize private school license and fee revenue to fund private school expenditures category, and the technical adjustment to correct non-state owned office rent expenses.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malone. Does anyone have any questions on either of those budget accounts? With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with that, I would move to close 1012616 and 1012672 as recommended by staff and read by staff.
Thank you so much. I have a first from Chair Dondero Loop, a second from Majority Leader Howdicky. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to the conclusion of our closing of budgets this morning for recommendation to the full committees. And I can go ahead and move to our next agenda item, which is a public comment. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to give public comment this morning? Welcome, and begin when you're ready.
Kent Irvin, Kentervin for the Nevada Faculty Alliance. Good morning. I would like to provide context regarding the Public Employees Benefits Program before the budget closing later today. We realize you are dealing with a difficult budget situation, but PEB benefits have already been reduced and not fully restored. Health insurance benefits are essential for state employee recruitment and retention. PEB has already approved rates for FY 2026 based on GovRec. Open enrollment begins May 1st, so any changes now would be difficult. Plan benefits are mostly being held constant compared with the current fiscal year, but some of the pandemic-era cuts are still in place, including higher out-of-pocket expenses and elimination of long-term disability insurance. Excess reserves were generated by PEB for years after 2011, when Medicare retirees were shifted to a private insurance exchange and actives were shifted to a high deductible plan. In the past few years, however, the excess reserves have been used to maintain benefits while the state funded claims at a lower level than PEB's actuary forecast. Pharmacy claims have been especially high. Excess reserves are projected to be tens of millions in the negative at the end of fiscal year. The mandatory reserves, as determined by the actuary, must be replenished. However, the speed at which they are replenished could be a policy decision. We urge you to maintain PEB benefits for the next biennium. Finally, the benefits for PEB Medicare retirees, currently $13 per month per year of service, has not kept up with Medicare cost or the state contribution for pre-Medicare retirees and needs to be increased. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jenny Hunt, Jennyhunt. I'm the director of Mariposa Language and Learning Academy, an independent charter school in Reno, where we serve students, 191 of them, 100% free and reduced lunch, 95% Hispanic, and approximately 40% English language learners. I'm here to thank you today for supporting our preschool programming and literacy programs. They are a huge benefit, and for our demographic of learner, it sets them on the pathway to success in school. I can tell you that when our students come out of our preschool programs or benefit from literacy supports, they are 2 times ahead of their peers that have not engaged in a pre-kindergarten program. And Senator Neal, to your point, we really focus on the QRIS system. That is a systemic rating system of all of our preschool programs. And to Senator Dondero Loop's point, it's around developmentally appropriate academics and really setting the stage for that long-term educational career. So we want to thank you. Mariposa has been very, very lucky to have those programs for the last 10 years, and we are proud to say that we are one of the top Title I performing schools in the state, and that is attributed to early intervention and your support. Thank you so much.
For the record, my name is Heather Dye with Nevada FFA. I'm one of the 7 career and technical student organizations representatives here of over 21,000 students, and I just want to sincerely thank you for getting rid of that limiting language that has been there since 2015. As somebody has boots on the ground with those students and those programs, it definitely has been a struggle. So I appreciate that support. I also want to thank several of you have been very open and wonderful mentors as we've had career and technical student organizations visit the legislative session over the years, and you've been wonderful hosts. And I truly believe in learn by doing for those students, and I think that's something career and technical education does in the classroom as well as the student organizations. So nothing is a better learning opportunity than being here and having some of our wonderful students get to meet you and experience this. So thank you again for changing that language.
Thank you so much. With that, we will go to Las Vegas for public comment.
Good morning, Chair Backus and committee members. My name is Julie Houchins, Houchins, with United Way of Southern Nevada, testifying in support of Budget 2709 and Budget 2621. United Way of Southern Nevada has managed the Nevada Ready State Pre-K program for over 10 years, offering high-quality education to more than 7,500 children in the Las Vegas Valley. Thanks to the commitment and support of the legislature this past year, United Way was able to support an expansion of more than 550 tuition scholarships with the ESILP funding at the 250% FPL guidelines for qualifying 3- and 4-year-old children, for a total of over 1,800 children in Southern Nevada. We support nearly 50 private child care partners to offer high-quality early learning programming to our youngest learners, with those Nevada Ready dollars being nearly their entire funding source. The scholarship opportunity not only helps the children with quality of care and future educational success and literacy, it also opens the doors for families to seek additional employment and career path opportunities. The $8,410 funding is not enough money to serve all of the children. United Way supports nearly 50 private childcare programs whose dollars are stretched to every margin to support a child's learning. Since 2021, United Way has been able to utilize the Infinite Campus to track children's learning, which is dependent upon getting data from the KEA and will integrate with the current K-12 pipeline. As I prepare for the Nevada Ready State Pre-K application for fiscal 26, I am forecasting a need for more than 2,000 seats to support our children and families who are affected by the economic downturn and challenges of other subsidy funding. Thank you for approving Budget 2709 and Budget 2621, and I hope we can continue to provide this kind of high-quality early learning education opportunities to create a better life for all Nevadans. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Yoder, Y-O-D-E-R. I'm the principal at the Hills Preschool, and we are a sub-grantee from United Way of Southern Nevada for Nevada Ready and the ESIL programs. We served 99 children this year, 40% of which were unhoused, and our families greatly, greatly appreciate the support from all of you. We look forward to continuing our partnership in the future.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Zakia Salam, and I am providing public comment on item that is supported by Department of Education, budget account number 2621 for the ECILP grant. I serve as the early learner director at, I serve as the director for early learning and community impact for the Leadership Institute of Nevada. I am also the senior facilitator for the ECLA, which is our Early Childhood Leadership Academy. In addition to that, most importantly, I am a parent of exceptional learners and understand the importance of early literacy readiness. With the ECLA, which is our Early Childhood Leadership Academy, I've seen firsthand how intentional talent development of early childhood leaders creates a ripple effect that strengthens the entire early learning ecosystem. The Early Childhood Leadership Academy equips early childhood leaders with the tools, mindset, and strategies needed to lead literacy readiness environments that align children for educational success as lifelong learners. This impact of the ECLA is intentionally purposeful and measurable. Before participants attended our Early Childhood Leadership Academy, only 15% of those attending felt that they had early learning readiness training that was sufficient to be in the classroom. After completing the program, that number spiked to over 70%, reflecting a significant gain in confidence and capacity. Additionally, 100% of those participants reported gaining the skills to integrate social emotional learning into literacy-rich environments, furthering supporting the whole child development. This kind of leadership development is essential for creating scalable and sustainable high-quality education in Nevada. By investing in people who shape early learning, the ECILP ensures we develop early childhood education leaders' capacity to foster and support lifelong learners and close opportunity gaps from the very beginning. I respectfully appreciate you being able to continue to support the budget for 2621, which supports the ECILP grant. This investment in leadership is an investment in Nevada's education system, children, and success of the future for Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Doesn't look like we have anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment, so we'll go to the phone lines. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give public comment this morning?
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to join the queue.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dion Gant, and I'm speaking today as a proud member of the early childhood education community. For several years in the field, I currently serve as a professional development specialist, supporting early learning programs and educators across the Las Vegas Valley and providing high-quality care and education to our youngest learners. I am here today to voice my strong support and appreciation and your approval for budget items 2621 and 2709, as they are continued and expanded to support educator training programs such as TEAP, the ESIP grant, and other state-funded professional development opportunities. High-quality early learning is one of the most impactful investments we can make as a state. From birth to age 5, children experience the most rapid brain development of their lives. During this critical window, they develop foundational skills in language, emotional regulation, social interaction, and early problem solving. Programs like Nevada Ready Pre-K and Early Childhood Literacy and Readiness ensure that developmentally appropriate, enriching, and nurturing learning environments are available to families across our state, particularly those that are most in need. These programs help children build resilience, strengthen social emotional skills, and gain the academic readiness that sets them on the path towards lifelong success. But this investment doesn't start with just the classroom. Expanding access to preschool seats also allows families to pursue employment, continue their education, and contribute to our state's economy, knowing their children are safe, supportive, and thriving. These programs support family stability and mobility, which ripple into positively affect the health of our entire community. But access alone is not enough. To ensure that every child receives high-quality care, we also need to continue to invest in our educators to make positive, high-quality care possible. Programs like TEACH and the ESIP grant and other professional development pathways allow educators to pursue degrees, increase their skills, and stay in the field, feeling confident, competent, and respected. This ensures that every seat added comes with a prepared and well-supported teacher who is equipped to meet the developmental needs of each child. A large portion of the Nevada early childhood education workforce lacks affordable access to training and higher education. These programs fill the gap and elevate our profession, leading to better outcomes for children, stronger classrooms, and more resilient communities. Thank you again for your approval in these critical investments and recognizing that early childhood education matters and we need to support our families, not only in the Las Vegas Valley, but in the Nevada state as a whole. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. And with that, we just finished our last item on the agenda, and that concludes our meeting.